He consumed a loaf of golden sap every single sunrise to ensure his eternal soul stayed tethered to his broken body. Tutankhamun, the boy king of the 18th dynasty, his reign lasted barely 10 years. Yet his burial remains the most famous discovery in archaeological history. He sat upon the throne when he was only 9 years old. His physical health was fragile from the start. He suffered from a clubfoot and a necrotic bone condition. Researchers found over 130 walking sticks inside his tomb. To combat this constant pain and weakness, his royal physicians turned to the most powerful medicine known to the ancient world: honey. It was not just a sweetener, it was a succored substance. The Egyptians believed honey was the physical tears of the sun god Ra. When Ra cried, his tears touched the earth and turned into bees. These bees then produced a nectar that held the power of the sun itself. This is why the young pharaoh started every morning with a specific honey bread. This bread was made from emmer wheat. Emmer was a hard grain that grew in the dark, rich silt left behind by the flooding Nile River. The farmers harvested it with flint sickles. Then they ground it between heavy stones. This process often left tiny bits of grit in the flour. We see the evidence of this in the worn teeth of mummified royalty. But the bread for the king was special. It was sifted through fine linen multiple times to remove every pebble. They mixed this fine flour with water from the river and a starter culture of wild yeast. Then came the most important ingredient: the honey. They used vast quantities of it. The honey used in the palace came from specialized apiaries in the Nile Delta. Beekeepers traveled on boats to follow the blooming flowers. This honey was thick and dark. It was full of antibacterial properties that we now understand through modern science. But to the priests of the palace, it was a way to keep the king alive. They added chopped dates and crushed tiger nuts into the dough. Tiger nuts are not actually nuts, but small tubers that grow underground. They have a sweet, nutty flavor and are packed with fiber. The bakers formed the dough into round loaves. They baked them inside clay ovens shaped like cones. The heat caramelizes the honey on the outside to create a dark, crunchy crust. Inside, the bread remains soft and moist. Every morning, the servants brought this bread to the boy king in the palace at Thebes. He ate it to gain strength for his duties. He had to restore the old gods. His father Akhenaten had tried to erase the traditional religion of Egypt. Tutankhamun had the heavy burden of fixing a broken kingdom. He changed his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun to show his loyalty to the god Amun. This shift required immense spiritual energy. The honey bread was his fuel. When Howard Carter opened the tomb in November 1920, he found jars of honey that were still liquid after 3,000 years. He also found baskets of dried bread. These were the provisions for the king in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed the soul needed food to survive the journey through the underworld. The bread was vital. It represented the cycle of life and death and rebirth. Just as the grain dies and is buried in the earth to rise again as wheat, so too would the king rise again. The honey never spoils. This made it the perfect food for eternity. It represented the immortality of the pharaoh. We know from the analysis of his mummy that he was sickly. He had malaria multiple times. He had a fractured leg that likely led to an infection. In his final days, he probably leaned heavily on this honey bread for comfort. The sweetness masked the taste of the bitter medicines like willow bark or myrrh. The high sugar content provided a quick burst of energy to his failing body, but even the tears of Ra could not save him forever. He died in 1323 before the Common Era. He was only 18 or 19 years old. They buried him in a small tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The tomb was meant for someone else, but his death was sudden. They crammed it with 5,398 artifacts. Most of these items were made of solid gold. But the most precious items to the king were likely those baskets of bread. They were the one thing that connected his mortal life to his eternal dream. The bread tells us more about the boy than the gold does. It shows us his human needs. It shows us the care his servants took to provide for him. The recipe was a secret kept by the royal bakers for generations. They used coriander and cumin to add a savory note to the sweetness. This balance of flavors was a hallmark of the royal kitchen. The bread was also dipped in wine during festivals. The wine was often flavored with honey too. This created a high-calorie diet that was rare in the ancient world. Most Egyptians lived on a simple diet of bread and onions and beer. But the king lived on the essence of the sun. Even his burial mask shows a face of perfect health and beauty. This is the image he wanted to project to the gods. Inside the tomb, the air was heavy with the smell of ancient spices and resin. When Carter first looked inside, he said he saw wonderful things. Among those things were the loaves of bread that had waited for 34 centuries. They were carbonized and black, but still recognizing. They provide a physical link to a morning breakfast from thousands of years ago. It is a haunting thought. A young boy sitting in a sunlit palace eating his sweet bread while the world outside bustled with the work of empire. He did not know his life would be so short. He did not know his name would be forgotten for thousands of years and then become the most famous name in history. He only knew the taste of the honey and the warmth of the bread. This daily ritual was his anchor. It was the moment of peace before the chaos of the court. The honey bread was more than food. It was a bridge between the human and the divine, a bridge between the desert and the river, a bridge between life and the great forever. The ingredients were simple, but the meaning was infinite. Every bite was a prayer. Every grain was a piece of the land he ruled, and every drop of honey was a promise of a life that would never truly end. He was a child, carrying the weight of a god. He needed every bit of strength he could find. The bread was his silent companion through the pain. It was the sweetness in a bitter life. We can still see the indentations of the baker's fingers in some of the loaves found in the tombs. It makes the history feel real. It takes him off the pedestal of a golden god and makes him a boy again. A boy who liked his bread with extra honey. A boy who wanted to live forever, and in a way he did. His story is told in every language on earth. His face is recognized by billions. The honey bread did its job. It preserved his memory as well as it preserved his soul. The bees of Ra are still buzzing in the fields of the Nile. The emmer wheat still grows in the mud. The sun still rises over the valley, and we are still looking back at him, looking for answers in the dust and the gold and the ancient bread. The jars of honey were sealed with wax to keep the air out. This preserved the chemical structure of the sugars. When archaeologists tasted ancient honey from other sites, they found it still had a faint floral aroma. It is the only food that truly lasts forever. This is why it was the primary offering in every temple. The priests would place loaves of honey bread on the altars every morning. They would recite incantations to activate the life force within the food. Then they would eat the food themselves. After the gods had taken the spiritual essence, it was a holy exchange. The king was the chief priest of all the temples. He was the one who theoretically performed these rituals every day. But in reality, he had representatives. Yet his own breakfast was its own ritual, a private communion with the sun. He would wash his hands in a silver basin. He would wear a clean linen kilt. He would sit on a chair carved from ebony and ivory. And he would break the bread. The steam would rise in the cool morning air. The honey would stick to his fingers. It was the most human moment of his day. Before the crowns and the scepters and the chariots, before the wars and the treaties and the construction of giant monuments, there was just a boy and his bread. This is the part of history we often forget. We focus on the battles and the dates. We forget the flavors and the smells. We forget that the people of the past were just like us. They had favorite foods. They had comforts. They had fears. For Tutankhamun, the fear was the darkness of the tomb. The honey bread was the light he took with him. It was the golden sun held in the palm of his hand. It was the only thing that could satisfy a hunger that lasted for eternity. The bakers would use specialized bronze molds to make the bread into different shapes. Sometimes they made them in the shape of animals or human figures, but for the daily breakfast, they kept it simple, round like the sun, smooth like the sky, thick and heavy and full of life. They used massive clay jars to store the grain in the palace granaries. These jars were guarded by soldiers. Grain was the currency of Egypt. People were paid in bread and beer. A man's wealth was measured by how much grain he had in his silos. The king had more than anyone. He was the provider for the entire nation. If the grain failed, the people starved. If the people starved, the king lost his power. The honey bread was a symbol of that power. It was a symbol of the abundance of the land. It was a symbol of the god's favor. When the Nile flooded at the right level, it was a sign that the king was doing his job. The gods were happy. The bread was plentiful. The honey was sweet. But the years of Tutankhamun were a time of great stress. The empire was recovering from the chaos of his father's reign. The borders were under threat from the Hittites. The internal administration was a mess. The young king had to rely on his advisors, Ai and Horemheb. These men were powerful and ambitious. The king was often just a figurehead. He must have felt the pressure of their eyes on him at all times. The palace was a place of whispers and shadows. In such a world, a simple piece of honey bread was a rare certainty. It was something he could control, something he could enjoy, something that did not ask anything of him. It was just pure sweetness. The tiger nuts were ground into a fine powder to thicken the dough. They add a creamy texture that balances the coarse grain. The dates were soaked in water to make them soft before being folded into the mix. This created little pockets of intense sweetness throughout the loaf. When the bread was baked, these dates would almost turn into jam. The coriander added a floral citrus note that cut through the heaviness. The cumin added a hint of earthiness. It was a complex and sophisticated food. It was a reflection of the most advanced civilization on the planet at the time. The Egyptians were masters of chemistry and agriculture. They understood how to manipulate the environment to produce the best results. They built irrigation systems that were marvels of engineering. They developed medicines that are still effective today, and they made bread that could last for 3,000 years. The discovery of the bread in the tomb changed how we look at ancient diets. It showed us that they were not just eating to survive. They were eating for pleasure. They were eating for health. They were eating for the soul. The honey bread of Tutankhamun is a masterpiece of culinary history. It is a window into a world that is long gone, but still feels familiar. We still love the taste of honey. We still love the smell of fresh bread. We still look for comfort in our food. We are not so different from the boy king. We are all just looking for a little bit of sweetness in a difficult world. We are all just trying to stay tethered to the life we love. The bread was his final meal and his first meal in the next world. It was the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. It was the taste of Egypt. It was the taste of forever. As the sun set over the Valley of the Kings for the final time, the priests sealed the door. They left the king with his treasures. They left him with his golden masks and his chariots. And they left him with his bread. They believed that as long as his name was spoken, he would live forever. They also believed that as long as he had his food, he would never be hungry. Today, we speak his name. Today we look at his golden face, and today we remember the honey bread that he ate every single morning. The sticky residue is still there. The memory is still there. The magic is still there. It is the magic of a simple loaf of bread that conquered time itself. Tutankhamun was buried with enough bread to feed a small army for a week. There were over 40 baskets containing various types of loaves and cakes. Some were flavored with aniseed, others were coated in sesame seeds. But the honey bread was the most prominent. It was the food of the gods, and he was a god who was also a vulnerable child, a god who needed to be reminded of the sweetness of the earth every single morning. The golden mask he wore in his coffin had a serene expression. It was the face of a boy who had finally found peace, a boy who would never be hungry again. a boy who would spend eternity in the fields of reeds. This was the Egyptian heaven. It was a place where the grain grew taller than a man, and the honey flowed like water. It was a place where every morning was a celebration of the sun. The bread was the map that led him there. It was the fuel for the journey. It was the promise of home. Every time we study the artifacts of his tomb, we are reminded of this connection. We are reminded that the past is not a foreign country. It is our own story. It is the story of how we care for one another, how we try to defeat death, how we find beauty in the small things, like the taste of honey on a warm piece of bread. The boy king knew this better than anyone. He lived it every day, and he took it with him into the dark. He knew that gold can be stolen. He knew that stone can crumble. But he believed that the essence of the bread would endure. He believed that the tears of Ra would never dry. And as long as we remember him, he was right. The honey bread is still there in the darkness of the museums. It is a witness to a lost world. It is a witness to a boy who became a legend. It is a witness to the power of a simple breakfast. He is still waiting for the sun to rise one more time. He is still waiting to break the bread. He is still the king of the morning, and the honey is still sweet. The legacy of the 18th dynasty lives on in every grain of sand and every drop of nectar in the valley. The boy who ate honey bread every morning is finally home. He is with the stars. He is with the sun. He is with the gods, and he is with us. The story of his breakfast is the story of humanity. It is the story of our hunger for life. It is the story of our love for the world. And it is a story that will never truly end as long as the sun continues to rise over the ancient sands of Egypt. The jars are empty now, but the spirit remains. The bread is dust, but the memory is gold. And the honey is eternal. The ancient texts say that the king will live for millions of years. Looking at the bread he left behind it is hard to disagree. He found the secret to immortality in a simple clay oven. He found the divine in the dirt. He found the sun in a loaf of bread. And he shared it with all of us across the vast ocean of time. He was the boy who ate the sun, and we are the ones who remember his light. The honey bread was his shield and his comfort and his joy. It was the only thing he really needed to take with him. It was the only thing that truly mattered. In the end, we are all just travelers seeking a bit of sweetness for the road ahead. We are all just boys and girls looking for our own honey bread in the morning. And we are all part of the same eternal story. The golden boy has his bread. The sun has its king. And the world has a legend that will never fade away. He rests in the silence of the valley surrounded by the echoes of his palace. The smell of the bread has vanished, but the taste of his life remains. He is Tutankhamun, the boy who ate honey bread every morning, and the boy who will live forever. The final loaf is waiting. The table is set. The sun is rising, and the feast is about to begin. It is a breakfast that lasts for eternity. It is a meal that defies the grave. It is the golden bread of the sun, and it is the most beautiful thing in the world. The journey is complete. The bread is broken. The king is at peace, and the honey is still liquid gold in the heart of the desert. This is the truth of the boy king. This is the truth of the honey bread. This is the truth of Egypt. It is a story written in the stars and baked in the sun. And it is a story that belongs to all of us forever. The end of the path is the beginning of the dream. The bread is the key. The honey is the lock, and the door is finally open. The boy king is stepping through. He is stepping into the light, and he is taking his bread with him. It is a wonderful thing indeed. The mystery is solved. The bread is found, and the king is home. He is home. He is home. He is home. The honey is sweet. The bread is warm. The sun is high, and the boy is happy at last. He is the Lord of the two lands. He is the son of Ra. He is the master of the honey bread, and he is ours forever. The golden residue remains.